hour now. So.
Oh, I see. Hmm. Okay, I'll share. Wait a minute, let me get this ready here. Oops.
So our next talk is by Mark Alvis, and the title, as he's getting himself set up to do the presentation, is Austroasiatic Etymologies of Words Related to Household Structures.
Okay, so Austroasiatic is the center of the mainland Southeast Asian etymological universe, right? And so looking at this is interesting because Austroasiatic is the oldest living, existing language family in the region. Well, let's see what we can say about houses from this data that Paul and I have assembled. Let's see here. There we go. So I'll be reviewing Proto-Austroasiatic etyma for words related to houses and residential structural elements. Okay, that's fine. We'll be considering how such lexical data can add to understanding of household structures in the late Neolithic period of mainland Southeast Asia. Now that's you can see immediately a little more interdisciplinary there. And even farther, trying to provide this lexical data to add to studies of the ethnohistorical picture of Proto-Austroasiatic and early Austroasiatic ethnolinguistic groups. So that you'll see what I mean when I get to that slide. And I am applying and testing the updates to the Shorto's MKECD, as Paul and I discussed. So clearly, I'm blending some historical linguistics and things we can call broadly human history, right? The little blue boxes there in the circle, and they should feed into each other. The late Robert Blust, wrote not too many years ago something of an uneasy alliance between linguistics and archaeology, and it's not always easy to combine the disciplines with different kinds of data and different approaches and such, but still, I have to rely on it. If you're doing historical linguistics and you're looking at language in history, archaeological and historical data has to be used to consider these things. And Paul and I did so with considering those Proto-Austroasiatic forms and such. But I think it works the other way. And lexical evidence of objects that are not going to be easy to get in the archaeological record. Those are some of the things that we have, right? Foods, garments, biodegradable construction materials, such as wood and bamboo and such, right? And of course, we have evidence of abstract concepts as well, right? Things that you just can't get from the archaeological record and probably can't even infer from the archaeological record, right? So that's something that the linguistics brings to offer, So, various historical linguists, I think, have brought this to bear. Certainly in mainland Southeast Asia, Roger Blanche has done a good deal, quite a few papers on that. So my research is historical linguistic in nature, not archaeohistorical, but it requires archaeological data. I have to pay attention to it. And of course, I think it works the other way and potentially useful information to archaeologists and ethnohistorians, but I don't know how easy that uneasy alliance can be made. So let's consider archaeohistorical stages of ethnolinguistic groups and with respect to residences. So, okay, Hoabinian groups, and this number 10,000 to 2,000 is thrown around as though Hoabinian groups suddenly disappeared in 2000 BCE, and we know it doesn't work that way, but something changed at that point, I guess. And so I'm not an archaeologist. I cannot get a lot of information about what hypothesized homes there were. Hunter-gatherers, rock shelters, those things stand out. It seems like short-term residences, if you want to call them that, or open air kind of settlements, if you could, right. This is different from the period of the Austroasiatic dispersal, at that end point of the Hoabinian groups. Agricultural settlements, long-term household structures. So there are holes for wooden posts, not the actual wooden posts because the wood is long ago disintegrated. Implied structures for raised floors, sometimes treated clay floors. That's an interesting one. Not a lot of detail. Indeed, the archaeologist Charles Higham wrote in 2017 about this dearth of detailed information about the house in mainland Southeast Asia from this pre-recorded history. And now an updated paper by Carter here. This is a nice quote. She put together quite a few dozens of publications, archaeological publications, looking at house in this distant past in the region. The Neolithic period, introduction of agricultural communities and widespread appearance of sedentary villages. There we go, sedentary villages, frequently associated with widespread use of pottery. If you've seen some of my past presentations, I've been looking at Austroasiatic pottery, not just Austroasiatic, mainland Southeast Asia. And here's an image that is included in her article. It's a nice image, impression of what it might have been. You see the posts, you see the raised floor, you see a thatched roof, you see a ladder in the back there. I think it's trying to show other aspects such as the pottery and pigs and such. But for our purposes, the household structure. Interesting, there's no walls. I'm not sure why there are no walls in it, but that's okay. Now this is all before Indic and Sinitic contact in the Common Era, in which architecture, we start to see stone and ceramic as primary elements, right? Indeed, the Indic word for brick in Khmer, the original Sanskrit word is a polysyllabic word, and the early Chinese loanword in Vietnamese, tile ngoi, they're both early rather, and so okay, that's not what we're talking about. So if we see these images here, you see it there on the left side, early Cambodian structures there, and you can see those I guess bricks on the top, and on the right side, the Han Dynasty era terracotta miniature house. This was found in northern Vietnam, and you can see, of course, it's got the little tiles, but the Proto-Austroasiatic words in this study are associated with a home in the middle, not those of Indic or Chinese words. Now, what those houses looked like 3,000, 4,000 years ago, right? That's the problem. So did it look like this? I'm not going to say that it does, because but we can know some of the elements, Okay, now there are no previous studies of Proto-Austroasiatic words for household terms, so I can't refer to the literature on this. What I can do is, just as a brief sample, is to look at Proto-Austroasiatic words for rice terminology. And De Floth in 2005 put out a publication which he listed, I think, a dozen words, 11, maybe a dozen words of Proto-Austroasiatic, his own reconstructions. And I decided, since Paul and I had done the legwork, as we were saying, to check this out and see how it compares. And so you can see there, for example, the husked rice, that good form there, runko there. And so on the right side, you see mainland Southeast Asia, 6 branches, external, meaning outside of mainland Southeast Asia, something like Munda, Nicobar, 3 branches. That's pretty good. Okay, this looks like it's got some deep history in Proto-Austroasiatic. Okay, and so here are some more of them. It's not all of them here, and this is how it matches up pretty well. So far, so good. And although I have to, well, no, that's okay. No, don't need to go in any extras. Okay, here are a few more. Here are, then not all of them. Okay, so in fact, Paul and I've updated this one here, and it looks like Khmer is this central language, and the other branches are just neighboring branches, something like Baknari, Katuic, and such. I can't remember, but something like that, and nothing outside of mainland Southeast Asia. So it looks like this one is not a valid candidate for Proto-Austroasiatic, but instead looks more likely, something that was traded potentially from Khmer, but we don't know for sure, but seems reasonable. And this one, it doesn't seem to be good. I'm not quite sure why they tried to reconstruct it. Well, Shorto did for his own reasons. I'm not sure about what De Floth's data was. By the way, all of this is checked. You can check all of these things, right? So if I'm saying these things, you can check them on Khmer Etymological Dictionary for these kinds of things. And we found a few more in our in exploring through it, and these look pretty good. Right? They've all got attestations both inside mainland Southeast Asia and outside. Okay, so we can do this. We can get this kind of data. And then the question is, can we apply it outside of linguistics, right? Outside of historical linguistics? Well, sometimes I've seen some mention of DeFloss rice reconstructions and talking about that history and such. Well, let's consider the words for Proto-Austroasiatic words for residential structures. And so, of course, we want to start with house, right? That's the logical place to start. And sure enough, as you can see here, all of the, we have 5 branches throughout mainland Southeast Asia, and we've got some outside. I've marked these ones as we're not sure, okay? That's a good thing to do, isn't it? Isn't it good to mark when you're not sure about something? You know, maybe more data will help clarify, but I think this is already enough, okay? So, and then, well, we would expect to have some kind of post, like in that picture we saw before. And yes, we do have something. Now, I will, full disclosure, you can see here, not applicable. So we don't have something outside. And I think at this point, it will have to be a hypothesis whether or not this can be considered a valid non-trade item that is something that was retained from the Proto-Austroasiatic stage. But at this point, that's what we're looking at. Unless I've missed something, I'll have to double check. Okay, and then we have some additional terms here. Floor joist. Ooh, that's pretty good. When we see it in Cossack and Nicobaric, as well as Katuic and Monic, we're looking at something. So that floor is something there. Bamboo joint, I've included it here. It isn't necessarily just for, or even specifically for, house structures. This would require an ethnoarchaeologist to do a little checking and see what seems like a good, whether or not this is a good match. Wall or fence, we can't always reconstruct a precise meaning because it could be one or the other. We don't know originally what it meant, but it's got some pretty good distribution here geographically. Oh, and then here's a slight complication of a Proto-Malayo-Polynesian word. So well, we have to put those in our notes and consider them and grapple with them. Okay, next one, a few more. Now, if you have a wall, it's good to have a wall opening. Now, we're not reconstructing the meaning as a window. Okay, in fact, some of the modern ones have the window, but it seems to be some kind of general opening, perhaps a vent. Again, an ethnoarchaeologist studying this would be very helpful to see, but some kind of wall opening, the ladder or stairs, that's pretty good. Now, only 3 branches, but between having it in Paric and Bahnaric and Cossack, that seems to be a pretty good distribution, suggesting reasonable possibility that this is Proto-Austroasiatic. Okay. Of course, our good friend weave, that is in all branches. Weaving, which is not just for, related to housing, obviously other kinds of things would have been woven, and but that word is a very solid Proto-Austroasiatic form. As for thatching grass, well, there are actually 2 of them. Now, what I don't have is a word for roof. We have thatching grass, and so that will have to do. And so obviously that's, what was going on for the roofs. I don't know the difference between the semantics of these two types, 2 regional innovations, but we have 2 forms for thatching grass. And so I've included lime, the mineral lime, in previous publications, including I was writing about Proto-Vietic, that connection with betel nut chewing, mixing the lime in with that. But in fact, there is an archaeological site that goes back about to 1500 BCE, close to the Proto-Austroasiatic dispersal, in which lime appears to have been used to make the ground soil hard, so a kind of not a raised floor, but a on the ground floor. And so it's possible. Again, ethnoarchaeologists might need to check that sort of thing. Just consider it. Okay, now these objects that are represented by these words, let's consider how they are attested in the archaeological record. As I said, sometimes the words are there for things that are not in the archaeological record. Now, weaving, that's fine. There are impressed patterns of plated material on pottery that I've seen pictures of, so that date back to that period. There are houses, net ground sites indicating residences. The posts, various locations with post holes, of course, again, not the actual posts, but just the holes themselves. And you can see maps, archaeological publications that show these diagrams of where the post holes were in the ground and such. Walls and fences, I guess they have to be inferred. But for joist, thatching, grass, wall opening, ladder, stairs, I don't think there's any in the archaeological record, but we've got these Proto-Austroasiatic forms for these. So this is some, it's not a lot of detail. Proto-language reconstructions going back 4,000 years are not going to be highly detailed. And this is just the way it is. And that's the limits, right? That's the limits of it. But this is still a good amount of structure, right? A good amount of structure. I think certainly food for thought for people who are looking at human history broadly in this domain. Now, I have looked, just to be clear, I also looked at these words, like I did at the last iCal. I talked about, a number of regional words and figuring out, the origins of them. And I looked at a number of more tradable items. In this case, I looked at housing, houses and housing structures and such to see, what's not Proto-Austroasiatic. And I'm not going to go through this. This is for later. But just to show you, I've looked at this, and so I know that these are not the Proto-Austroasiatic things. And but again, when we look at things where we can see these later Austroasiatic innovations, we can separate that from the Proto-Austroasiatic forms and get more chronology out of get some more mileage out of the data that we're sifting through. Okay, so the Proto-Austroasiatic data with respect to what's called the cultural package, right? The Neolithic agriculturalists that spread into mainland Southeast Asia and have been increasingly discussed as being Austroasiatic ethnolinguistic groups are known for their agriculture and for their pottery. And I'll point out that pottery is a gap in the Proto-Austroasiatic reconstructions, a very frustrating thing. And of course, weaving, that's good. We see that there. We see the agriculture, we see the weaving. Dog, at least, that one's definitely reconstructed, right? A pig is a complicated one. And now we can talk about these homes and settlements. The settlements are part of the deal. That's part of what was the cultural package. And I think I'd better add to this language. It definitely looks like Austroasiatic was the language, ethnolinguistic group that was spreading, brought that language with them. And so that's all. That's basically what I have to say. And thank you for your attention.